Are eggs healthy? That's a great question. Let's take a closer look. And fortunately for us, there is a metric ton of scientific research trying to answer this question. And let's start with heart disease, because eggs have been lumped in with foods to limit to reduce risk of heart disease and stroke for decades, with some headlines even claiming that eating eggs is as bad as smoking cigarettes. This 2020 meta-analysis showed that eating 1 or more eggs per day for 2 or more months overall increases LDL cholesterol by 7 or 8%. But in their subgroup analysis, they identified a high amount of variability, which was also highlighted by this 2023 review, which concludes that eggs can absolutely be a part of a healthy, balanced diet. But there are some individuals for which the cholesterol and saturated fat content of eggs does have a significant impact on their serum cholesterol and triglycerides, and that only this small subset of people may benefit from limiting egg consumption. And I say may because even though there is an increase in LDL cholesterol with high egg consumption, that doesn't seem to translate to an increase in cardiovascular disease events. This 2020 dose-response meta-analysis of prospective studies showed that eating up to 6 eggs per week actually lowered cardiovascular disease events inversely proportional to the number of eggs. So the more eggs, the better, up to 6. And they showed that cardiovascular disease incidence continued to decrease up to 1 egg per day. There was no impact on stroke risk, and if you have already been diagnosed with coronary heart disease, eggs do seem to increase risk of heart failure, at least above a couple per week. But I want to show you what this looks like in graph form. The solid line here is the relative risk reduction of increasing number of eggs per week compared to not eating eggs. And the dotted line is the confidence interval. So you can see that at best, this is a 5 or 6% decrease in cardiovascular disease incidence. And that confidence interval is riding that one line, which would mean a null effect. No change. To show you how boring of an effect this is, let me show you what the dose response looks like for vegetables from this 2017 meta-analysis. Same idea, the solid line is the relative risk reduction, dotted line is the confidence interval, and here we're looking at grams of vegetables per day. And the more vegetables you eat, the lower your risk of cardiovascular disease, with something like a 30% lower risk at 600 grams of vegetables per day. That, by the way, translates to about 5 servings. So most recent meta-analyses looking at whether or not there is a link between egg consumption and cardiovascular disease risk, including this one published in 2023 that looked at up to 2 eggs per day, conclude overall no or a very weak association between egg consumption and cardiovascular disease risk and outcomes, and highlight a potential problem in early studies that linked eggs with heart disease, how egg consumption correlates with overall eating patterns and other health-related behaviors. This 2021 study in Italy showed that people who ate more eggs, especially more than 4 per week, tended to consume less fruit, nuts, whole grains, and more meat and meat products. This 2021 study out of the US showed that people who eat more eggs also tend to eat less fruit, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, legumes, and low-fat dairy, while consuming more full-fat dairy, red meat, and processed meat, therefore saturated fat in general, and also are more likely to be smokers and have low levels of physical activity. The authors of this 2023 review note that very few studies have actually accounted for this in their statistical analysis. And failing to account for these dietary confounders affects the outcomes of the study. So unless you are someone whose serum cholesterol tends to skyrocket when you eat eggs, you probably don't need to worry about it from a heart disease standpoint. What about other health outcomes? This 2024 study in older adults shows that eating at least a couple of eggs per week reduces risk of Alzheimer's disease by 47%. This 2019 meta-analysis showed that egg consumption did not affect inflammatory markers at all, including high-sensitive C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. And this giant 2020 review of systematic reviews showed that eating eggs had no effect on our risk for colorectal adenomas, bladder cancer, prostate cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and brain cancer. That there was, as we've already discussed, a slight increased risk of heart failure, also ovarian cancer and GI neoplasms, and a decreased risk of hypertension and stroke. They also concluded that there was too much conflicting data on our risk for type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, ovarian cancer, and upper aerodigestive tract cancers that we can't draw any conclusions. This is a really cool graph from this overview of the systematic reviews. The AMSTAR score is a measurement of the quality of that systematic review. That's on the y-axis. The x-axis is the number of studies included. The size of the circle is the overall size of the data set. And the color coding is the results. Red means that systematic review showed that eggs were overall harmful. Yellow means the results were controversial. Green means they showed that eggs were beneficial. And look, most of them are blue, which means there was no effect. Eggs are a nutrient-dense protein food. A serving is 2 large eggs, and that will give you 83% of the daily value of biotin, 53% of the daily value of choline, 35% of the daily value of vitamin B2, 56% of the daily value of selenium, 37% of the daily value of vitamin B12, 31% of the daily value of vitamin B5, 18% daily value for vitamin A, 12% daily value for vitamin B9 and zinc, 11% daily value for vitamin E, and 10% daily value for vitamin B6, vitamin D, and iron, and 12.6 grams of protein. That's a huge amount of nutrition for 143 calories. And why, when you crunch the numbers and calculate nutrient density, you end up with a Nutrivore score for eggs of 355. That beats out chicken. So it appears as though eggs are overall health neutral, and they are a food that can help us meet our nutrient needs.